Heston, thank you for joining me.
That's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
Tell me, who is Heston Blumenthal?
Well, first, he's a human being, but he's also human doing. So I see it that the being and the doing, the being side is more feminine energy, and the doing side is more masculine energy. One hits the sympathetic nervous system, which is the doing, and the parasympathetic, which is the being. So you think, in terms of feminine energy, that's where the creativity and imagination sort of lies, whereas the manufacturing or production is in the doing side. So in terms of cooking, the human doing side is 200 grams of something or other, 50 grams of something else, put it in the oven for 25 minutes, cook it until it's 80 degrees, whatever. That recipe is doing. So it's a structure, instruction of a process, making something. The being it also embraces failure as an opportunity to learn, but the doing is fear of failure.
By default, you have to, right?
You have to.
Countless recipes and things you try.
Absolutely. But those two things both, and it's like imagination. Creativity is the next step on from imagination. When you imagine something, there's something called, so I'm sounding a bit geeky here, but there's something called myelin. And myelin, you know, in an electric cable, you've got the wires, and then you've got the plastic sort of shiny covering. So it's like plasma fatty covering from the neurons. And when they transfer from the front to the back of the brain, you get imagination. So we can join dots that I don't think any other creature can do this. You can imagine, say, a giraffe with a top hat, a monocle, and a walking stick, teaching theoretical physics to a classroom of penguins clapping.
Sounds like a film.
That's imagination.
Sure.
That's what human beings. It's a unique thing. I said the late great Ken Robinson, who's done that brilliant TED talk. It's the most watched
Talked about it before.
time.
Amazing.
Yeah. How education can kill creativity. When he died, they asked half of people to finish this sentence. Imagine if. And my answer was, imagine if we lived in a world with no imagination.
It's terrifying.
Nothing would happen.
Frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, you are a creative genius. And what's so interesting about just listening to how you introduce yourself, that so much maturity and perspective, because you've been on a journey, right? And you still are.
Yes.
You're piecing it all together. ADHD, bipolar,
Yes.
but always being creative. So now harnessing that, do you feel like you've got more understanding of your own creativity? You clearly never lost that, right?
Yeah, it's always been a difficult question to answer. You know, how do you come up with these ideas? And you know, there's hundreds of books trying to tackle this subject, thousands of pages of information. And I realised with me, just like the example of the giraffe with the penguins, it's dot joining. And find things that won't on the face of it go together, but you can put them together. So for example, sound, the use of sound to highlight an element of the food. So for example, we did one experiment where it was bacon and egg ice cream. The same ice cream, but half the people would listen to sizzling bacon, and the other half would listen to a chicken. When the sizzling bacon was played, it was perceived that the bacon had more flavour than the egg. When the clucking sound was played, the egg was stronger.
Interesting. So you're manipulating.
Yeah, manipulating, playing, discovering. If you another one, it'll work with coffee, but best way is a glass of red wine. You write the word wine in really sharp letters like this. There's no curves. And then write the word wine in really curvy, almost like made out of balloons. Have a sip, with the same hand, have a sip of the wine looking at the rounded letters. Then take another sip, but this time you're looking at wine in the sharp letters. The wine is sharper.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
So you understand this, and you have probably tried and experimented, countless recipes, bacon and egg ice cream, right?
Yes.
I mean, liquid nitrogen is something we have to talk about, right? You brought engineering, you brought almost science into the kitchen. Have you nearly blown up a kitchen before? Have you had a few things where you're just like, oh my God, that absolutely
Well, funny
didn't work?
enough, and this wasn't ultra modern stuff. In the early days, the fact that was a pub, and I had a pub oven, 6 gas rings, 2 of them didn't work. It was an old oven, got reconditioned, but the pilot light didn't work. So I was going to put something in there, turn the gas on. Oh God, I haven't got any matches. So I walked out to the front of the house where the bar was, got the matches. I think the phone rang, and somebody people used to think we were a Chinese restaurant in the early days. Anyway, probably told them about, come in and have a pint and a pate or something. Anyway, I went back to the kitchen. I was probably gone for a couple of minutes. I lit the gas and the oven blew up. It didn't blow up. There was this massive gas explosion. Lifted me up and put me sitting on the fridge. And then I was my hair, smelt this burning smell. And I burnt most of the hair on my head. And I tried to do service in the evening with a bag of frozen peas on top of my head. I've had that. I gave myself frostbite from liquid nitrogen. When the nitrogen first came in, it was so exciting. But it's minus 200. So you wouldn't have a sip of oil from a deep fat fryer that's about 200 degrees. You fry the food in it, and so nitrogen is a lot safer than that. But I put a banana in it, and it froze the banana. So if you tapped it with a pestle and mortar or something, it just shatter. So I just thought, I couldn't wait. I had a bite, stuck here, and I basically gave myself frostbite on my lip and on my tongue. So,
but you're experimenting.
I'm experimenting. I have had some accidents.
I wondered, almost like the mad scientist that bringing that into the kitchen. But look at where that's got you.
Yeah, it's a bit like, do you remember Professor Brainstorm?
Yeah.
Had all those glasses, and he kept on making this stuff up, and it would more often not blow up, but he'd get there in the end.
Yeah. But you've never sort of relented, if you like, and I guess that's probably what's kept you so relevant. You've never got complacent. Have you still got that? Is there still experiments and things going in your head, joining the dots to look at the next thing that you can do, or have you calmed down with that now?
I've calmed down with that, but because I've been fascinated in the microbiome for 10 years, 12 years, and we started off in evolutionary terms as a single cell bacteria, and then over millions of years we became human beings. Particularly after my bipolar diagnosis, I'm finding more and more connections between bacteria and mental health. So I'm exploring that as well. Basically, it's all the things to do with senses. I'd say that I've been in the business of emotion and feelings, and just happened to use food and cooking.
That's interesting, because it does feel like almost a focus of what was experimenting with food, with the ADHD and then more recently the bipolar diagnosis. You've almost been experimenting with your own behaviour. And we were talking before we started filming as well about you starting to reflect and realise how other people might have felt working with you and around you. Getting that bit of perspective and empathy where you're like, oh, I must have been a handful. I must have been a challenge.
I wasn't driving things forward. I think I didn't have too many, looking back at it, episodes. I think because I kickboxed for 15, 18 years, and then I spent all those hours over the years in the kitchen.
Gives you a focus, right?
It gives you a focus. And I'm not sure, some of my levels of exhaustion, I tried to light a blowtorch once to brulee a lemon tart, sprinkle it with sugar, light the blowtorch and give it a blast to melt the sugar and it goes crisp. Anyway, I took the blowtorch, I walked over to the sink and I turned the hot tap on. And I remember thinking, you can't possibly light a blowtorch with cold water. Very Alice in Wonderland. But I tried to light a blowtorch. I tried to light the gas with water.
This goes back to joining the dots. There was a misalignment.
Yes, and I don't know how much of that was just me, exhaustion, ADHD, And there's a big crossover between ADHD and bipolar as well.
But bear in mind, I mean, this is for me coming into this conversation as an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. You're a pioneer. You've got the 3 Michelin-star fat duck.
Yes.
That's kind of the kind of how people would know you, and these quirky liquid nitrogen stuff. But you've built a business. You've built a brand, a personal brand.
Yeah.
At the same time as putting yourself out there for what you're doing. Have you enjoyed that journey? Because that focus, that relentless energy you've had for it, which again has probably been fueled by having ADHD. You've used that hyper focus to be. But do you have that perspective now, where you can see it all makes a lot more sense? You've been able to do it, because setting up a business is not easy. Long hours, relentless days, and stress.
I know for the first 10 years I worked it out. I'd had 20 hours. That's 20 hours sleep per week.
Oh my God, I'm just trying to do the maths. That's not a lot.
120 hours a week roughly working.
With some nights no sleep, or was it just an average of 1.5, 2 hours?
I'd go to bed about 2 and wake up at 5. And I don't know how I did it, looking back at it now, but I did. And that was probably a mixture of, I had no choice, because it was my first paid job as a chef, was opening this little pub. I just wanted to cook. I thought maybe one day I could get a star. The idea of 2 or 3 never even came to me, but I wanted to cook. So I jumped in hook, line and sinker, and then I didn't have any choice. So the deadline's at 12 o'clock, the doors open, and at 7 o'clock in the evening, the doors open for the customers. Did
you keep the passion? So you set your kind of goal, your North Star, of being a chef and ultimately trying to get the star.
Yeah.
In those long days, were you still enjoying it? Were you still fueled with the enthusiasm, or did it almost become like there's a tip over sometimes?
It was
with
a
the stress. You know what I
mean? We've got the Hind's Head, which is a pub that's got a Michelin-starred. It's next door to the Fat Duck, about 500 to 600 euro building. There's a fireplace there, wooden fireplace, and in gold leaf across the top on the front of the fireplace, there's this saying which I think is brilliant. It says, fear knocked on the door, faith answered, and no one was there. So by faith, you just say belief. So you can't have one without the other. You can't have hot without cold, fast without slow, tall without short. And so if your belief, fear, we all have fear in some shape or form. But if the belief is stronger than the fear, then you go in the direction of the belief. Sometimes the fear is stronger than the belief.
Hence life being
like that, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. Do you fear anything now? Because you've got a lot of clarity and perspective. You've got a maturity to look back on things that may not have made sense. A drive to be successful.
Yeah.
Which, you've got 3 stars. You set out to just try and get 1. Do you have anything that?
Work-wise, I wouldn't say, but I since I didn't have, I have. How do I say this? I have more fear now than I did before my diagnosis.
Can you explain why?
No, the only reason I can think of is because the manic highs and the lows have been so manic high like this, and then crashing down, up, crashing down. Think of it as a piece of string. You stretch that string out
to smooth out the extremes, right?
And it becomes more like rolling hills. It takes apparently a minimum of 2 years to really settle down on the medication. So my medication, I'm on about 10% of what I was on when I came out of hospital, which is just over a year ago, actually. There were times when I felt zombified, but it was just softening everything. So I don't have those manic highs anymore. Things like, silly things like, I'm not great in crowds, don't feel that comfortable in crowds. Airport, I used to go, I was lastminute.com checking through. I missed a handful of planes, but that's it. But right last minute, I think, and I would ignore when they say gate open, when quite often they're boarding. So now I get to the airport nice and early, work out where the gate is, how long it's going to take me to get there, and I keep an eye on the timings. So there's things like that.
But that's come with the experiences you've not enjoyed, and they've created extremes that you're trying to now, coping mechanisms and ways of managing.
I didn't have fear of that I didn't have fear of that before. The medication makes a difference, definitely. But once, I think the diagnosis of this, it's like, say, ADHD, the diagnosis is really important for me, and I think for everyone. What you do with a diagnosis is a different kettle of fish. And I've got my coat of arms here, and my motto is question everything. But that's got everything has two perspectives, minimum. So everything, like you question the whole thing, whether it's our whole body or whether it's the whole universe, but also everything, so every single thing that's in the big everything, that makes sense.
That taps into your creativity, doesn't it? You're constantly looking to understand, you're naturally curious, and you're, dare I say, also not just inquisitive, but apprehensive.
Apprehensive.
Looking into something almost with a fear.
I think the Fat Duck's tiny. The kitchen now is way bigger than it was. And because everything's tiny, I think I hyper-focused. If I'd had a kitchen that was 5 times the size and a restaurant with big gardens, there's many more things to try and take care of. But being small, I realised I wanted to find out the minutiae of stuff, zooming right in. And at the beginning, I had, as I said, the pub oven that basically blew up on me. I didn't have all the modern equipment, so to get consistency, I was sort of not forced. I wanted to know why things worked. So I've been zooming in on molecules, flavour molecules, let's say, for example. I didn't know, I couldn't believe this, I couldn't know the dictionary meaning of gastronomy until 6 months to a year ago. I never looked it up. I thought it was to do with fine dining, but in fact, it's sourcing, preparing, cooking, and eating good food. Could be a sandwich. And so the term, I didn't used to like the term molecular gastronomy, but now it's okay because it's doing the same thing. You just zoom in on a smaller scale, how to get the right texture in pasta. You look at what happens how you roll the dough. Do you dry it? What temperature do you dry it for? How long do you dry it for? Cooking meat, realizing that there's an enzyme at 57 degrees plus, you kill it, but while it's below 56, it breaks down the proteins and tenderizes the meat.
Fascinating.
So I had to set the temperature 56 and then try and cook it for 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours, we went up to 48 hours of cooking and do the taste tests.
So is there anything in particular that has really surprised you in all these experiments and all these things you find out from being naturally interested? Is there one thing that stands out like, just blown away by and being able to use that in the restaurants?
I mean, the use of sound was a big thing. There's certain dishes that were real landmark dishes for me that first one was a crab ice cream to go with the crab risotto. And people don't really bat an eyelid now when you mention about the crab ice cream, but in 2000, it was pretty radical.
Groundbreaking.
And I realised that if I'd called it a frozen crab bisque, it's much easier to understand. And this led, first paper I co-wrote, Sussex University, they took this and did it with smoked salmon. So you either called it frozen smoked salmon mousse or smoked salmon ice cream. And when it was called smoked salmon ice cream, it was found to be something like 15% saltier, just by the name, because you have an expectation of sweet and get salt, instead of an expectation of getting salt and getting salt. So the difference between expectation and delivery is more marked. So that led me into the whole thing of using words in the shapes of letters. And I was amazed at all of the impact that can have. Then when I started playing around with sound, I met this professor at Oxford University who was working on crisps. So he put me in a booth, headphones with a mic, and connected me up to this bit of sound kit that I could hear I was listening to my crunch through the headphones, just in real time, or just about in real time. So when he changed the volume and the frequency, it changed the texture of the crisp. So when the sound was more crisp, the crisp was more crisp. But when it softened, they almost tasted a bit stale. So then I did lots of experiments with sound, and ended up with a dish called Sound of the Sea, which looks like sand, but it's all edible. It looks like the sea lapping up against the shore, which is the sort of foam sauce. Then there's foraged sea vegetables and cured fish. We serve that with a seashell. And in the seashell is a little iPod Nano, or an MP3 player, a tiny one, and you put the headphones in and you listen to the sound of the sea.
That's proper creativity,
so,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's unique. And I'll tell you what I love as well, is that you know, if you consider Heston as the chef,
yes,
it instantly goes into that kind of creativity of the dish. There's so much more to it. Then there's the ambience of the restaurant. And then a key thing I'm learning from just always trying to understand, you know, sort of be a better version of myself, if you like, is it's not just what we eat, it's when we eat and who we eat with. It's that sense of community. So you bring that together in a restaurant environment, and probably tapping into the mental health conversation as well, that sense of community and eating together, which the Mediterranean diet is sort of now becoming more, people are more aware that it's not just what they're eating, it's the fact that they all get together. They eat together, they spend their weekends eating.
If you don't eat together, if you eat alone, if you do it mindfully, that makes a big difference. So the classic one is you eat one raisin. I mean, generally what we'll do is get a handful of raisins and put them in. Take one raisin, look at it, imagine where it's come from, where it's been grown, how it's been dried, all of that stuff. And then you look at where for example, where the light and shadows are, the little wrinkles in the raisin. You then pick the raisin up and roll it between your thumb and forefinger, and you feel how it's softening. And all along then you wonder how it's going to smell. Then you bring it up to your nose, you start smelling it, see what you can smell. Then eventually you put it maybe against your lips and then in your mouth. Let it sit there, what's happening in your mouth. Maybe some saliva. If it feels a bit juicy, some saliva is coming into your mouth. And then you start eating it. And you just are aware of the change of flavour as you bite into this raisin. And you do it slowly, and then swallow it. And you'll never taste the same you never taste a raisin like it again. You can do it with the cube of chocolate.
I literally lived that with you. Like, I mean, and there's me destroying some sushi stood up at the counter, you know, and not appreciating anything of what I've just eaten, and polishes off in 5 minutes. That's not particularly healthy, right?
No, it's not. So eating can be one. I'd say it's the most intimate thing that human beings do, because we're putting eating and drinking, we're putting this inside our body. So everyone has a relationship with food. We have likes, dislikes. Quite a lot of the dislikes come from something that happened in younger childhood. Art can be profound, can be mood changing, create loads of emotions and feelings. But if you don't look at art, you're not going to die. And food is so much more complex, because if you don't eat, you will eventually not be here anymore. And it's also a subject. I got involved in the GCSE O-level food and nutrition, which it's shocking, because it's optional at GCSE level, and they've removed it from A levels.
But we still have to learn algebra.
But you still have to learn algebra. And food and nutrition, cooking, eating, is the only subject at school that every other subject comes underneath. You've got maths in the ingredients, you've got obviously language with recipes, you've got you chop things and you heat things, there's physics, you get new molecules get produced after you apply heat to ingredients. So those new molecules, it's chemistry, you eat it, it's biology, there's history, it's geography.
Let alone, by default, what you're eating will probably be stimulating you to learn more if you're eating chips and pizza for lunch, you're not going to have a great afternoon with concentration.
Yeah, exactly.
Real life. with the education curriculum is something I was actually going to talk to you about, because you're self-taught as a chef.
Yes.
You don't learn that in school. You've now gone to another level of understanding nutrition and so on. It feels like there's a part of you that wants to give back. That exercise was part of it, and maybe even mentoring as well. Is that a part of your life and something?
Yeah, I think particularly since the bipolar diagnosis, and I felt that I had a chance to share my experience, and one, it's to be able to feel that you're giving something back. And I was surprised at how few people wanted to talk about it.
Because when we talked about fear earlier, I was going to actually ask you about the fact that I see you as brave.
Yes.
Doing that. You didn't bat an eyelid. The minute from an ADHD point of view, the bipolar, you want to share it. And you want to share it because you know your lived experience can help people, because you naturally seem to want to help people.
Yes.
I would suggest you didn't feel brave. You felt that you were doing exactly what you felt you should be doing.
I didn't feel brave. No, I didn't. It was exactly how you said.
Yeah, but that reception you got, where people didn't seem to be talking about it and so on, did that surprise you?
It surprised me how few people had the motivation, for whatever reason, to open up. However, on a couple of things I did, particularly after the Newsnight, I did a Newsnight interview, dozens of comments came through, well, hundreds, maybe more. And, there was a woman, she wrote in and said she thought the TV was talking to her. I laughed out loud because I thought the same thing.
Empathy.
How does that make sense? And then these are all classic bipolar things, hallucinations. So sound hallucination is when it's not a sound in your head, it could be a tune, it could be some voices, but you hear it outside. So sound and touch and obviously sight. So the reason why I think the TV was talking to me was I do a lot of research on bipolar on YouTube. And if you do that or play certain types of music on YouTube, the algorithms, this is before I really thought about it, the algorithms, they're made for you. So I think that might have had something to do with it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, puts you into a spiral where you're consuming the same thing, which is almost feeding the For You page, isn't it?
Yes.
It becomes addictive, which certainly from an ADHD and bipolar point of view means you're then consuming stuff that in some ways you could be learning from, but it could also send you into a spiral.
Yes.
And I guess you ultimately are managing that. I wanted to go back to food when we were talking about the kind of creativity side of putting foods together and so on. I wonder what right now, if you were going to have your last supper tonight, what that dish would be.
I've been asked this before, and it sounds like a cop-out, but I don't have a last supper. It would depend when it was, where it was.
And right now, so it's today. It's beginning of February 2025. What would Heston have for dinner tonight? What do you feel like?
I don't know. Okay, good question. What should I have for dinner? Again, it's a cop-out, I know, but it depends how hungry I am.
I wondered that. Have you had a good lunch?
I haven't had lunch yet, actually.
Because I'm guilty of that. You can salivate and fantasize over food when you're hungry, and then obviously it's out of your head when you're not. But
yeah.
I suppose where I'm going with it is there just a food that, for whatever reason, you go back to? You particularly like. It might be different variations of it, but it's a particular.
No, I mean it's so. I don't have any food hang-ups. Let's say, I adore the smell of licorice, but I don't like eating it because it's so sweet. But that's about it. And because of that, I don't have a favourite food.
No. So I'm not going to get a last supper out of you.
You won't get a last supper out of me.
We'll stay hungry. I used the term brave earlier because man to man, it feels refreshingly normal now. We can just be so open. 20 years ago, people weren't doing that.
No.
So I think that's probably why I use the term brave. Have you found an outpouring from people now coming to you that you can have support from, as well as feeling like you're supporting them, almost like a tribe?
Yes, to find other people that have shared experiences, because with bipolar, there's very clear characteristics about being bipolar. I paused then because I didn't want to say having bipolar. Yes, it's a mental illness. As a mental illness, it's a categorized mental illness. But there's also whacking great benefits from it. You know, it's not all bad. It's basically just an exaggerated form of life, whereas all humans have highs and lows in their life. It's just this is they're much more extreme.
Yeah, I get that.
They are the same.
Yeah, and one thing that you've clearly been able to do, particularly with the fact that being 3 Michelin-star, is be successful. I feel like I'm sitting with someone super humble, no ego, arrogance at all, very present.
Oh, thank you.
To get to where you've got to, you've had to have huge drive and relentless energy and ambition. But sitting here now, how would you describe success?
Mine's never been money driven. When I make a discovery of joining the dots sufficiently that there's an idea there, that feeling of an idea that you can then move towards creativity, because imagination is the imagining, and then when you do something about it, you go into creating. And when that light bulb moment clicks on, the feeling is fantastic.
Staying on almost that sort of achievement, you're like 3 Michelin stars. One, how proud are you of that? And I guess secondly, how important are they in context of the success of you and the restaurant?
Yeah, I'm very proud of the 3 stars. I never imagined that would happen. When I was told on the telephone, and the voice of the head of the Michelin guide on the other end of the phone said, "Are you still there?" Just silence, totally silence. It's also a bit of a monster, you're holding on to a monster by its tail, because also keeping it is, and you get marked every year.
I was going to ask you that. So there's a criteria. So
yeah.
So once you've got it, it's not a given. You'll just keep it.
No.
And was there a noticeable difference in the success of the restaurant from notching up the 3rd?
Yeah, because within a year, I had the 3rd Michelin star and the best restaurant in the world award.
Congratulations.
So then it all exploded.
So it's really quite, because I can't think of another industry where there's almost that sort of barometer that you can win accolades in sport and so on, but in a business environment, doing what you so enjoy, to then have a rosette kind of representing skills and experiences.
Within reason, if I wanted something, so a piece of kit, I'd buy it, I'll get it, and then work out how to pay for it afterwards. I remember once upstairs in the office after lunch service, and my accountant was there, and he said, "Look, you've made, I made £500 that week, which was like unheard of then. This is years ago." And literally, as he was saying this, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door, and it was the man from Bonnet, which is a French kitchen company, with the brand new induction hob. This is when induction was hardly used, like this sort of size. And I went, "Ah!" And then Aki was very funny, his softly spoken Indian accent. He said, "Heston, how much does this cost?" And the guy from Bonnet said something like £600. So he took the piece of paper and just crossed off the 500 profit. So
I've got a kind of a sort of question that will lead into the end of our conversation.
Yes.
I can sense there's a real depth to you, and the amount of people I've spoken to in the build-up to today, really excited them, and they've all got a story, whether it's the liquid nitrogen or the been to the restaurant and loved it, watched you on different things, and a lot of that also flips into the mental health side of things. What would you like your legacy to be? If someone was talking about you in X years' time, what do you think that would be? What would you like that to be?
I think we all like to think, because everyone has a legacy, in our own ways we've made a difference, a positive difference to the world that we live in.
What a legacy.
And
I feel that about you as well. Like just even the way that it led into coming today. You know,
Yes.
I invited you. I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to learn from you.
Yeah.
And I knew that I can learn, and other people watching and listening can. And then that was it. You know, I remember putting that across to you, and you said, "I'd like to come." That's your why. That's your mission.
yes, also there was an Irish lady, palliative care nurse, that about 10 years ago wrote a book on the regrets of the dying. And by far the number one regret of the dying, so imagine you're lying on your bed, you know that you're on your way out, the sun's coming through the window, you've got your loved ones coming to see you, and you reflect on your life. And the biggest regret of all is I wish I lived a life true to myself. I thought, my God, that is really powerful. What happens if it's like I've gone down the wrong motorway.
Yes.
Where's my purpose been in life? Having some kind of purpose. It could just be helping one person do something.
Yeah.
But the feeling that you've made a difference by helping, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Awesome purpose. Well, yeah, what an amazing way to end. You know, I was looking forward to this conversation, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have too.
Yeah, I really have. I'm surprised I didn't go off on too many tangents.
No.
Because I have a habit of doing that, going all over the place and
you've
then trying to close loops.
And it pieces together so much. You know, that you bringing up the importance of creativity and the TED Talk and how that's being so squashed in schools. It's a powerful message, but you can rejuvenate at any time. In adult life, there's plenty of people that are pivoting, plenty of people.
Yes, so this can be, as you said, it can be rejuvenated or created.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Heston.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.